Porbeagle, come here, boy. Hey, have you seen my dog? He has this conical snout, fusiform body, swims, and his first dorsal fin has a white or grayish white tip at the base. Have you seen him? Oh, there he is. Hello, everyone. I'm the student of life, a student of life, so let's get to learning. Today, the subject is the Porbeagle shark, Lamna Nasus. I have several topics to discuss and a conservation message at the end. Let us swim in and find out about its background. What genus, family, and order does the Porbeagle shark belong to? What are its physical measurements? How old can either of the two subpopulations get? The Porbeagle shark is part of the genus Lamna. The genus belongs to the family Lamnidae, and the family Lamnidae are members of the order Lamniformes. Its max total length is close to 3.7 meters. One measures the fork length from the snout's tip to the fork in the tail, while the total length goes to the tail's tip. There are two known subpopulations and could be three. Sizes between subpopulations and sexes are different. North Atlantic porbeagle males have a fork length of 2. While South Pacific males are 2.04 meters long. As for the females, the North Atlantic porbeagle is 3.02 meters and the South Pacific one is 2.08 meters. The porbeagle's max weight is greater than 227 kilograms. The North Atlantic subpopulation's max age is 26, while the Southern Hemisphere can reach an age of 60 years. Brr! Quickly, I'm moving on to how this fish keeps warm. The porbeagle shark belongs to a very special group of fish that can regulate their body temperature, meaning they are endothermic. A few other shark species are endothermic too. How do they generate their heat? Wouldn't they lose their heat via the gills? They gain all the heat from the energy they get from their food. They keep their heat by having their red muscles near their spine instead of near the surface and having multiple Retia Mirabilia, singular Rete Mirabile. The Rete Mirabilia is a mesh network of blood vessels next to one another where heat is exchanged. Typically, heat from the outgoing arteries transfers to the ingoing veins, but for the Rete Mirabilia, near the red muscles, the heat goes from the veins into the arteries. How much can it elevate its body temperature above the ambient water temperature? This creature can increase its temperature above the ambient temperature by 7 to 10 degrees Celsius. It's time to move on to the shark's range. Where are the porbeagle sharks located in the world's oceans? One can find porbeagle sharks in the North Atlantic Ocean and a circumglobal band in the southern hemisphere that covers the Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Oceans. One can find them in two latitude bands, 30 to 70 degrees north and 30 to 50 degrees south. Porbeagle sharks rarely swim in the Mediterranean and North Seas. Why aren't the areas connected? Does this shark travel or does it stick around all year? The North Atlantic and Southern Hemisphere subpopulations don't interact. The population near North America's eastern coast migrates during spring or early summer, following the coastline and traveling back in the late fall. Meanwhile, the population around Europe travels moderate to short distances of less than 1,500 kilometers. One rare exception traveled a recorded distance of 2,370 kilometers from southern England to northern Norway. We are now following the shark to its home. What sort of water region does it live in? And does it live in any specific locations? Is there a temperature range they thrive in? How shallow or how deep can they go? The porbeagle shark lives in temperate, subarctic, and subantarctic water regions. It is a pelagic shark meaning one can locate it in the open ocean. Also, one can spot them near continental shelves and offshore banks. These sharks can tolerate temperatures from 1 to 23 degrees Celsius. One source I read said they sometimes are in -1 degree Celsius water. The depth temperature is from 5 to 10 degrees Celsius. The depth temperature means the temperature at the hook's depth. They prefer cooler temperate waters below 18 degrees Celsius. The depth one can find them in ranges from only 1 meter deep to 1,809 meters deep. One such source I read points to them being found around 700 to 750 meters. Hey, I can see the shark is about to feed. We should keep our distance. What is their diet? Are there any differences in what they eat depending on their size or the season? They eat dogfish, crustaceans, cephalopods, groundfish, teleosts such as mackerel, redfish, filefish, and various other species. Groundfish are fish that eat near or on the sea's floor. The answer to whether they eat different things depending on size and the season is mostly yes. The top two food items don't change much. A notable exception is that Porbeagle sharks with a fork length between 150 and 200 centimeters eat pelagic fish and cephalopods in the springtime. This may be due to what's available during the season and location. It is time to talk about their conservation status. How endangered is this shark? What are the reasons for this status? The International Union for Conservation of Nature lists them as vulnerable in their red list. First and second, porbeagles only have 1 to 5 pups with an average of 4 after 8 to 9 months of gestation. Third, these pups slowly mature at a rate of 16 to 20 centimeters in fork length every year and begin anywhere from 68 to 78 centimeters in total length. The North Atlantic porbeagle males are mature around 155 to 177 centimeters in total length, whereas the Southern Hemisphere ones become mature between 140 to 165. North Atlantic females become mature around 200 to 219 centimeters, while Southern Hemisphere porbeagles are mature between 170 to 195 centimeters. North Atlantic males mature between 6 and 10 years and reach 50% maturity at 8 years. Females mature between 12 and 16 years and reach 50% maturity around 13 years. In my research, I didn't find any information about the age of maturity for the Southern Hemisphere subpopulation. The last reasons are human related, and I will discuss these in the next slide. Human impact on porbeagle sharks. How do humans impact porbeagles? What do we catch them for? How long have we fished for porbeagles? What data proves overfishing was done? Is there a type of fishery where fishermen catch them? Where is this done? What species were they caught as bycatch within the North Atlantic? Which fisheries in the Southern Hemisphere caught them as bycatch? Humans reduce the porbeagle shark population through overfishing and as bycatch while fishing for other animals. Humans catch porbeagles because of their meat, oil, fins, turning them into fish meal, etc. One can think of shark fin soup you might hear about in certain countries. People have fished them since at least the 1920s off of Canada's eastern coast. In the 1960s, fishermen caught over 9,000 metric tons of porbeagle sharks, and this led to the long line fisheries collapsing in Canada. In the 1990s, only 1,300 to 2,600 metric tons came from these fisheries before catch quotas were introduced. In the Northern Hemisphere, sharks get caught in bottom trawls, hand lines, and gill nets as bycatch. Meanwhile, fishers mostly catch porbeagle sharks as bycatch in the Southern Hemisphere. In the Southern Hemisphere, porbeagle sharks are caught as bycatch by tuna long-line fleets. Also, they are bycatch and albacore pelagic drift net fisheries. Let's see how specific countries have tried to sustain and increase their numbers. What are a couple of countries with conservation measures? What has each one done? What laws manage the Porbeagle shark population? What does each law do? The two countries being covered will be the United States and Canada. I will only point out the law used to manage Porbeagle sharks in Canada. The United States manages them in the pelagic shark category, later in a separate category through the 1976 Magnuson-Stevens Fishery Conservation and Management Act. The 1976 MSA increased the range where the United States protects up to 200 nautical miles and established 8 regional fishery management councils. All of the councils develop MSA's conservation and management compliant plans. These plans must hold to 10 national standards. The 1996 Sustainable Fisheries Act strengthened requirements to prevent overfishing, promote the rebuilding of populations, etc. It amended the 1976 Act. The 2007 Reauthorization Act established catch limits and accountability measures while amending the High Seas Drift Net Fishing Moratorium Protection Act and giving science a greater role. This further boosted international cooperation on conserving shark populations. In 2011, Congress passed the Shark Conservation Act. It amended the Moratorium Protection Act. Its sole purpose was to improve the conservation of all sharks, domestic and international. This act required the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration fisheries to produce biannual reports about nations doing illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing or bycatch of protected species, or nations that don't have comparable regulatory measures to the United States. The Modernizing Recreational Fisheries Management Act of 2018 amended the MSA. This act sought to improve data obtained from recreational fishing and improve the management of mixed-use fisheries. It gave another boost to science's role. As listed on the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration Fisheries website, the Porbeagle shark is one of several that has a retention limit of 0. No keeping them except in limited circumstances. Meanwhile, Canada manages them under the Fisheries Act. It is time to see what happened on the international scene. Have there been any international regulatory measures passed to regulate the conservation of Porbeagle sharks? Yes. Countries part of the Convention on Migratory Species listed Porbeagle sharks in Appendix 2 in 2008. This includes coverage of CMS Memorandum of Understanding for Migratory Sharks. They listed them in the CMS Appendix 2 to facilitate conservation. The Northeast Atlantic Fisheries Commission adopted a directed Porbeagle fishing ban in 2010. They renewed this ban several times. Also in 2010, the European Union prohibited landing any Porbeagle sharks. Fishing boats must release any accidental catches to the sea unharmed. In 2012, the EU reduced the total allowable catch in EU waters to 0. No EU flagged vessels can fish, keep, transfer between ships, or land Porbeagle sharks. In 2013, signatory countries to the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species added the Porbeagle shark to the list. It required cities to ensure that permits accompany exports, showing they source them from legal and sustainable fisheries. Next, here's my short conservational message. Porbeagle sharks are a top predator and would be a substantial loss for their ecosystem if these sharks went extinct. Few other shark species can live in cooler, temperate waters. This means the prey they eat might not have another predator in the ecosystem. Therefore, they need all the help they can get. One should not expect their numbers to rebound right away. Two reasons for that. First, they have a low reproductive rate. Second, they mature slowly. It will require cooperation between governments and fisheries, both recreational and commercial, to not only sustain but increase their numbers over a long period. It is only through all of us working together that we can get their global population back to pre-1960s levels. Now, what can you do? Here are a few choices you can make. Get involved with some local conservation groups. Call your local government official and ask them to support bills promoting porbeagle conservation. Eat at restaurants that source their food from sustainable fisheries. And support any local zoos and aquariums promoting conservation. It's time for my references, and they're in written and visual lists. I hope I helped someone to learn a fascinating fact today, or help to reinforce an old one. I leave you all with one last piece of advice. As the world keeps on turning, one can keep on learning. Thank you for tuning in to my presentation, and goodbye.